All right. Well, thank you for coming to listen to my presentation. These are this is my best evidence showcase of the INTASC standards. First off, what are the INTASC standards? INTASC stands for Interstate New Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium. So it's basically a list of standards that a group put together to assess new teachers to make sure that they're ready to run a classroom. I really appreciated Montana State University's summary of the standards, saying the work of INTASC is guided by one basic premise. An effective teacher must be able to integrate content knowledge with the specific strengths and needs of students to ensure that all students learn and perform at high levels. So basically, we're just trying to meet all of the kids where we're at as we teach. The first standard is that a teacher understands development. So the professional educator understands how children learn and develop and can provide learning opportunities that support their intellectual, social, and personal development. Once again, meeting kids where they're at. When I first came, I noticed that there was a social tension in the room amongst the girls. There seemed to be a lot of issues. So during recess, they participated in team building activities to bond with one another in the hopes of easing that tension. So by developing friendships and learning to encourage one another, because social tension can make learning hard. So by participating in team building activities like building a pyramid, they had to encourage one another and build each other up with their words rather than tear each other down. One other thing that we did was talk about privateering. As we're thinking about the way the kids develop, the interest of fourth graders, everybody loves pirates. They're fun, they're exciting, and we decided to lead a discussion about whether privateering, being a pirate for the government, was okay or not. Just letting them sit in that discomfort was really interesting because as fourth graders, they love to share their opinion. And so in the beginning, oh yeah, it's fine to be a pirate, or no, it's not. And some of them ended up changing their minds because when we laid out the evidence, we talked about it, they were like, oh, maybe God doesn't think it's okay to kill people, and maybe we're not supposed to steal, but maybe we can. And they went back and forth, and it was really interesting to let them sit in that as fourth graders and then give them a chance to share their opinion too in an organized way, but also train them to support their opinion with facts. Second standard was understanding content. The professional educator understands the central concepts, tools of inquiry, and the structures of the disciplines that he or she teaches, and can create learning experiences that make these aspects of the subject matter meaningful for students. So basically, can I take big ideas that I understand and put them into kid language that makes it accessible to them? We used images of common items such as milk and ice cream to make real-life math connections. So we actually had them up here on the board, and they got to see, oh, this is a gallon. We're going to hold a gallon. We're going to touch a gallon. We know what a gallon is, what it feels like. I've had a gallon of milk before. Now, how many gallons are in a pool? And to make that connection was good for them to have that hands-on kind of stuff. It was encouraging to me to hear students using mathematical terminology in their everyday conversation. I heard one kid say, I wonder how many pounds of chocolate are sold in the United States for Valentine's Day. If I knew that, I could figure out how many ounces of chocolate are sold. And so just to hear that mathematical language in everyday conversation was really encouraging for me, and it served as an informal assessment, too, of how much they were actually understanding. Third standard was understands difference. The professional educator understands how students differ in their approaches to learning and creates instructional opportunities that are adapted to diverse learners. We have quite a range of learners in this classroom, and I believe that the wide range of learning styles and needs represented here is a demonstration of the diversity in God's creation. He designed each student to have different giftings, and it's a teacher's privilege to challenge the students in areas in which he or she is strong, but also support and strengthen them in the areas that they struggle. And that was something that I got to work on. In theory, it's all easy because you don't actually have to work with real kids. But meeting them where they're at was a struggle for me and something that I got to grow in as I was here. One way we did that was having visual, auditory, tactile ways that they could engage with the content. But in addition to that, they also had work to challenge their critical thinking skills or reading skills when they finished something early. So differentiating the classroom, we had all sorts of ways to engage with content, but still some students would finish earlier than others. So they either got to read or have some sort of math work to do depending on the content. For me, it was wonderful to see some learners grow in their willingness to persevere independently through challenging problems. So we had packets like this that were critical thinking problems and reading problems, and at the beginning, I gave it to them, they're like, what is this? I don't know how to do this, and they just gave up. but with a little bit of encouragement, by the end, fourth or fifth packet I got to hand out, they're like, oh yeah, we got this, let's go. And that was really encouraging for me to see them kind of develop some sort of perseverance in that. Fourth standard was designing instructional strategies. The professional educator understands and uses a variety of instructional strategies to encourage a student's development of critical thinking, problem solving, and performance skills. That ties back into the math packets because that was some of developing critical thinking, developing problem solving skills. In addition to that, we were able to employ a variety of instructional strategies. One of my favorite being letting kids form research groups for science, where they got to, I didn't teach them, I said, here's the material, you go figure it out. Here's your assignment. They got to research together and then present their material to the class. So we were working not only on their research skills, on their problem solving within their group, but also presentation skills and how they can present that information effectively to the classroom. Lab books were a fun way to explore our novel this semester. We got to organize our learning, being very hands-on and figuring out, I believe that being hands-on is a great way for kids to handle knowledge and to learn things, and so this was another way for them to organize it visually and be able to engage with the material. Anchor charts were another thing we got to do, processing our thinking together. We drew this castle and then talked about what it means to be a citizen and how we have our Christian flag up here at the top because we're citizens of Christ's kingdom first and foremost. And then we're also citizens of America. And how do those compare and contrast, and what kind of responsibilities do we have as citizens of both America and Christ's kingdom? Small groups were another way to give students space to process their learning together. Being hands-on, being collaborative was really good for them, and being outside on a nice day was beautiful too. And finally, math stations, where students were able to practice applying their math concepts with games and manipulating numbers, really being able to talk things through and practice the math concepts in a different way. Because rather than just doing it on a worksheet, they actually got to manipulate the numbers in one way or another. Standard 5, manages and motivates. The professional educator uses an understanding of individual and group motivation and behavior to create a learning environment that encourages positive social interaction in the classroom. So classroom management was a major area of growth for me, and it was really great to be able to build on systems that were already in place. They had their personal behavior charts on their desks where they move their paperclip up and down as their behavior ebbs and flows throughout the day, and they're able to keep track of that themselves. We also had tallies on the board for table points, so they had not only a personal record of their behavior, but also as a group, this is what we're working on, and this is what our behavior is looking like. And then the cotton balls in the jar were, we call them compliments, and when they're really doing well as a whole class, they're collaboratively focused on their learning, they get a compliment, and when they fill out the jar, they get a party. So I got to use those, and it was easy for me to pick it up because the kids already knew what was going on. But it gave me the freedom to try some management techniques of my own as I saw problems arising that weren't being dealt with the systems that were currently in place. So I got to use some biblical integration, talking about how God is love was throughout all of our Bible lessons, and we were able to one-on-one talk about, okay, are we showing love to one another right now? Is this how Christ would behave toward one another? And just getting to really apply those Bible lessons in a meaningful way. We had one-on-one discussions about personal daily goals. There was a couple kids that weren't responding well to me as a teacher, and so me being able to come down and talk to them in the morning and say, hey, I noticed this pattern yesterday. Did you see that too? I'm seeing it again this morning right off the bat. Can we set a goal today, just you and me, that today you're going to try to do this more? And putting in positive language, you're going to do this more rather than this less. And so we had that goal together, and when they achieved that, we were able to have a reward, which was really good. Seemed to be pretty effective. And then small group discussions about positive attitudes. When things came up where we were talking negatively about or to one another, or even talking politics came up at one point, and we were like, oh, I'm not going to be friends with them anymore because they voted this way. They're in 4th grade. They can't vote, but they still had that opinion that they weren't going to be friends anymore. And so getting to talk about, well, how do we talk about politics with one another and still love one another and treat each other kindly, even when we disagree? And what does that look like as Christians? Standard number 6 was communicates. The professional educator uses knowledge of effective verbal, nonverbal, and media communication techniques to foster active inquiry, collaboration, and supportive interaction in the classroom. Behavioral expectations were one way that I got to practice communicating. I, in the beginning, didn't realize that you sometimes have to spell it out very, very clearly what you expect from them behaviorally. So at the end of a period of instruction, writing on the board, hey class, what are we supposed to do when we're in small groups? How are we supposed to behave? And having them create that list of behaviors so that I could reference back when something went wrong. What did you say you're supposed to be doing right now? Not just me giving instructions. That was really important for me to remember. Having a call and response, a way that I can get their attention without having to work really hard and spending lots and lots of time to get their attention. That was something that I had to work on, but that eventually became a fairly effective tool of communication between me and them. Having things that they must do and things that they may do on the board. Having something, if you finish an assignment early, or if you're wondering what you're supposed to be doing, it's up there on the board, and not expecting them to remember that necessarily, but having a place where they can reference it. Asking open-ended questions. For me, that communication was a way of assessment as well, because if I ask a question that they can easily answer yes or no, they have a 50-50 shot of getting it right if they just want to take a shot in the dark. But to ask an open-ended question gives me some sort of understanding about how well they were understanding what I was trying to tell them. And then following up with, like, how do you know that? Or why is that the case? Gives me an even further understanding of how they're doing. Having PowerPoints, Rachel told me that, hey, you can put everything on PowerPoint. Oh, that's a really good idea. Realized that the time that I spend with my back to the class writing up on the board when I have a lot of words to put down isn't necessarily the best time spent. So when I have time to prep a lesson that fully, that I can put it up on a PowerPoint, it just makes the lesson go smoother, and I spend that time helping them learn rather than writing up on the board. And then the asking why or how do you know to follow up was an important communication technique for me. Standard 7, plans and integrates. The professional educator plans instruction based upon knowledge of subject matter, the community, and curriculum goals. So taking all of it into account, taking where the kids are at, what's happening in the school and their community, what's happening in their lives, and the subject matter itself, and trying to link them together to make it effective. So privateering, that concept that we talked about earlier, was one of the ways we got to integrate subject matter. We got to take our social studies content, which was talking about privateering during the Civil War, and say, okay, this is what happened. This still happens today. It's still a thing during war. And taking the Bible, what does God say about this, and how are we as Christians supposed to think about this, and then letting them write about it. So we got to integrate all three subjects together and let them experience that kind of integration. As we talked about Hollis Woods, which was the novel unit that I got to teach, we got to, once again, integrate Bible and writing into our literature and talk about how we should think Christianly about this. Hollis Woods had a lot of things she wanted. It was all about wants and what does a family look like? And we got to talk about, what does a family look like? What does God's family look like? If you don't have one, a family here on earth, what does it look like to be part of God's family? And to let them write about those experiences and even take what was happening in the book and use it as a mentor text to then write their own descriptive paragraphs was a really unique experience of integration. And then just talking about loving one another, and as we're moving through the Bible curriculum, giving them a chance to write and journal about their thoughts and feelings and what they're learning. So we're talking about love, or we're talking about, Jesus said that if you hate someone, it's the same as murdering them. Does anybody hate anyone? What does that look like, and how does that make you feel? And is there something you need to apologize for? So letting them have an opportunity to write as well. Now, the feedback from this was interesting for me and something I did not expect. Eventually, I saw kids seeing how I was integrating my faith with my writing and the way that I read and the way that I looked at the world. And by me being really explicit about that, I started seeing it coming back at me in assignments. So they would turn in a writing assignment, like we did an autobiography, where they got to write out their story. And in my model, I said, hey, one thing I want to be remembered for, and one thing I want to grow in is the way that I look like Christ and the way that I live every day. And several of them, when I got theirs back, they too had, I want to be remembered for loving others like Christ did. And that was really encouraging to me to be able to see, okay, so I'm not doing this for nothing. There's, not only does my faith pretty easily slide into the content matter, but they're seeing it and it's changing their lives and hopefully changing the way that they view the world. Standard 8 was evaluates. The professional educator understands and uses formal and informal assessment strategies to evaluate and ensure the continuous intellectual, social, and physical development of the learner. So we had a lot of ways to assess the kids, whether it was open-ended questions or an actual exam, but some of the informal formative assessments, so as they're learning, kind of to gauge their progress, we had math stations where we got to see them engage with numbers and see how they were doing. We had one-on-one writing conferencing. We just got to sit down, how you doing? How you feeling about this? What can we work on together? And then just something like a self-assessment where I'm feeling really good about this. Oh, man, a little wishy-washy. I have no idea what's going on. Was really helpful for me as an educator to kind of guide my next words, my next steps. And then we had summative assessments like tests, papers, projects, and presentations, some of which we got to go put up in the hall to kind of show their work and show what they had learned. Standard number 9, reflects on practice. The professional educator is a reflective practitioner who continually evaluates the effects of his or her choices and actions on others, students, parents, and other professionals in the learning community, and who actively seeks out opportunities to grow professionally. So I got to do this in 2 ways. One was the post-lesson reflections. After I taught something, I got to conference with Jackie and say, okay, what went well, what didn't go well, and what can I do better next time? And then there was also my recorded responses. I had to record several lessons and then rewatch them and evaluate myself in a lot of areas and just say, okay, what was I hoping to see? What did I see? And then got to send that back to my supervisor as well, and she got to comment too. That was very helpful for me to have immediate feedback on that. And then also setting daily and weekly goals was a way that I got to be reflective in my practice and say, okay, this is what I want to work on, this is what I want to see. And then at the end of the week, did I see this or did I not? What do I need to do better? How can I still improve? Standard number 10, participates in the professional community. The professional educator fosters relationships with school colleagues, parents, and agencies in the larger community to support students' learning and well-being. Now, being in New Jersey, away from home, and only here for 4 months, I didn't have too much of an opportunity to engage in the professional community. However, I did get to participate in the professional development seminar at the beginning of my stay here, and also working with 2 fabulous 4th grade teachers was a really great opportunity for me. I certainly learned a lot from them as they guided me in lesson planning and classroom management, all sorts of things that I had never done before, and I got to learn from them. But I hope that I was able to give back to the community as well with lesson prep and whatever else, whatever questions might have sparked that we were able to work together, and that was really encouraging for me. We got to laugh, smile, eat, and stress together, and it was fabulous. And I hope that whatever school I end up at will have a learning community, a professional development community that's as supportive as you guys have been. So thank you for that. All right, my philosophy of education and learning. Sorry, I left it over here. So, I believe that the primary goal of Christian education is to train students to be productive citizens of the kingdom of God by helping them develop spiritually, socially, personally, and academically. So we kind of try to cover all areas as teachers. The process doesn't happen overnight. Therefore, I believe that part of a teacher's goal is to train students to be lifelong learners. It's a process that doesn't happen overnight, and so we really need to train them that even after they leave our classroom, they get to keep learning, and we do that by modeling that ourselves. A teacher is the most influential variable in the classroom, and so modeling curiosity and learning in our own lives is a super effective way to get the kids excited about what they're learning, because if we're excited, they will be too. However, due to the unique giftings and challenges of each student, teaching must be diverse if it's to be effective for all students. A variety of techniques employed by a teacher who's aware of his or her students who works for his or her A variety of techniques employed by a teacher who's aware of his or her students' needs, who works for his or her students' benefits, and who is continuously learning will be most effective in the classroom. I believe that students learn best through modeling, repetition, and hands-on experience, and will benefit when, where possible, the reasoning for behavioral and academic expectations is explained. I think that the key to successful Christian education is twofold. That the educator remembers the goal of Christian education. We're training human beings to be successful citizens of the kingdom of God, not programming robots who simply spit information back at us. And secondly, students are invested in the learning process because they're aware of the weight of education and their responsibilities as citizens of the kingdom of God if they know Christ, and then as citizens of a country and as members of the classroom community. So reminding them that they have a responsibility too. It's not just us up here spitting out information that they get to parrot back. They need to be invested in that learning process if it's going to be the best that it can be. And then they can apply their learning to their own lives. So I have had a wonderful time here at TCS. I got to learn so much. I have pictures to prove it. Goofy ones, straightforward ones. I love these kids. I love the learning community I've gotten to be a part of. They're the sweetest ever. So thank you, fourth grade, for welcoming me into your lives. I've learned so much, and I hope that anywhere I end up, it's going to be as good as it was here. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm an emotional person.